Hello and welcome back to the Out of Spec podcast. I'm your host, Francie, and I'm joined by, oh my gosh, Jordan. Great to see you again.
Yeah, in the flesh.
In the flesh.
Just enjoying some wine on this fine podcasting evening.
It is a nice evening. It's rainy outside. It's cozy. I have one of my winter sweaters on.
I have nice. One of my million hoodies. So
yeah, just you and Kyle.
Me and Kyle, these gray hoodies, I tell you what.
I've actually been turned on more to hoodies since being around y'all because, I think I like sweatshirts in generals, but man, they can be really comfortable, like perfect for any situation.
And me and Kyle are very stylish, so as you can tell.
Yeah.
Anyways, do we want to talk about how I got here?
So Jordan's actually visiting me where I live. So you've been on a road trip out from Colorado to Missouri to Tennessee, where we are now, and then you'll keep venturing on from here, and you're doing it all in a Tesla Model 3.
That's right. I am pretty much exactly halfway on the road trip, at least the projected road trip. I'm almost like, what's going to happen next? Like, where am I going to go? But it's mostly plotted out. And yes, I've done about 1,700 miles in Beak, our old faithful Model 3.
It's a good number.
Kyle's OG one, the one that helped start this whole out of spec entity of channels and things.
Yeah.
And it's seen better days. There's some squeaks, some rattles, some things happening. Some battery degradation. 140,000 miles is what I should be hitting tomorrow.
Wow.
So this car is up there in mileage, but it is just a beast.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So you say that you noticed some things, like things are rattling and stuff, and battery degradation. So what exactly is coming? What are you experiencing as you're driving this for so many miles?
Well, first of all, I guess going into it, I was like, oh, this is fun. This is actually my first solo Tesla road trip, which I think is fun. And interestingly, yeah, my first solo EV road trip was not a Tesla. It was a Rivian. And if you want to hear more about Rivian road trips, there's another episode on that because you also did one recently.
Yes.
But Tesla-wise, I've driven them and I've done road trips in them, typically with people like Kyle or whoever. But this was the first solo time, and I was like, I'm a little nervous. This car is old by a lot of metrics, but also I just don't have to think about it. That's part of the perk of a Tesla, especially before everything else like goes nax. Their supercharger network is just reliable and everywhere. And so this, I kind of left without even thinking about my route, really. I was like, the car will do it.
Yeah.
And the car has been really, really good. Almost to the point where it seems to like understand its own battery degradation, which is interesting because, on the screen in Teslas, you say like percentage. If you tap it, it'll show estimated miles. The estimated miles always way off.
Okay.
Although granted, I'm doing mostly highway driving. So maybe they'd be accurate in a city situation at low speeds. But the highway driving, when you put in your destination, it's been really pretty darn accurate on where I'm going, what time I'll get there, what charging stops to take, what state of charge I'll arrive at each charging stop.
Okay.
Like really well.
That's cool.
And I even know how to adjust that because, when I left Colorado, my first charging stop was Lyman, which I guess is still in Colorado, but it said I would arrive there with 33% state of charge. I arrived there with 23%, but that was because I was allegedly hooning it. And it was cold weather though. Like there's a few things it doesn't fully, I think, grasp. Like the cold really hurts it.
Okay, yeah.
But I've arrived here and it was 55 degrees.
Yeah, not too bad here.
So today's efficiency was actually really spot on today. So all you haters, I have not crashed Kyle's car.
No.
I got pulled over today.
Leave him alone. Oh, you did?
I got pulled over.
Actually, don't leave him alone. I take it back. Y'all keep doing what you're doing.
Get this. I got pulled over today for driving too slow. More or less.
No way.
Basically, they're really intense or this guy was really bored.
Who's they? Where were you?
The police gentleman.
In Tennessee?
In Tennessee, yep. On 24, is that this road? 40, yeah. And I was like, oh, I'll just go the speed limit, which is ironic. The time I really focus on the speed limit, I get pulled over. And I was passing semis, and there was a couple semis that were just far enough apart from each other and I didn't go into the right lane in between, and I got pulled over for that because the guy was like, you can't be in the left lane unless you're like actively passing. And I was like, oh wow, you're really stickler on that. Like he was really nice. We had a good conversation. He didn't even give me a warning. He was just like, hey, FYI, I can see you're from out of town. I was like, yep.
Yeah.
So fun fact though, got pulled over and Kyle's Model 3.
For just basically not following specific traffic laws about passing and speeds in that way.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
not too bad.
No,
Just
they're
more
like
of a learning opportunity.
more of a learning thing. Yeah. So
Stay out of that left
it's a good, I mean, that's a good rule of thumb. And I usually stay out of the left lane. In fact, I hate people camping in the left lane. So it's very ironic that I sort of got pulled over for it.
No one's perfect, you know? We all do our own pet peeve. It's just all projection. But so you've been driving around and, you know, I'm going to just, I can't help but compare it to my Rivian road trip because kind of what we were talking about before is that you don't really have to plan out your stops because of the Tesla infrastructure. So do you feel like you could just carry on and no matter kind of where you needed to pull off, you would have infrastructure there waiting for you to charge?
Pretty much. So when I set out on this road trip, first of all, I wanted to figure out how to road trip a Tesla, which honestly, that's very easy. But just, you know, I had the head knowledge. Just let me do it by myself and prove that I can do it to myself. I wanted to see if I could do it really without planning at all. So it's been almost no planning. I mean, there's been a couple times where like it randomly chose a 150 kilowatt V2 supercharger. And I looked on the map and saw V3 nearby and I was like, I'll just switch to that one. Like a couple times where I sort of overrode its route planning. Mm-hmm. Or it was like, oh, you can't make it. And I was like, oh, no, it means I can't make it with 10%. But so there's a couple times I pulled into chargers with 2% state of charge because the Tesla didn't think I could make it and I thought I could. So proper out of spec way.
Yes.
And I also wanted to see the state of charging in the Midwest.
Okay.
Because this is a Tesla, which is on the best network, but in the Midwest, which is nowhere near the coasts. So this will be interesting because there is a stretch later in the trip, and I'm working on kind of filming most of it for motoring, for the Spec motoring channel. There's a stretch later in this trip where I'll be going from Dallas back to my hometown, and there are stretches where I'm not really sure what to do. There's a stretch between Dallas and my brother in Northwest Arkansas that's 210 miles between superchargers.
With nothing.
Which I don't think this car can do, or maybe if I do 50 miles an hour. But there are CCS chargers on that route. And so ironically, this is like the wrong car for the job. In theory, I don't know. We'll see what happens when I get to that point in the video and in the road trip. But
So
I'm intrigued.
No spoilers yet. We'll just have to see what you do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm curious on how you'll deal with that. Like what on earth?
Yeah. So I don't know. There might be a bailout at a Jeep dealer that's a level 2 charger. I don't really want to camp on that.
Yeah.
But that's a bailout opportunity.
Okay.
But it's like you don't think of level 2 charging as your road trip stops.
Oh heck no.
So
they're not. They're your stopover charging.
So this will be really interesting. But so far it's been awesome. And even when I first got in the car, I was like, oh, I hadn't been in the Kyle's Model 3 in a long time. And just turning the steering wheel, huge creak squeaking noise. Pretty sure it's the driver's side upper control arm. I replaced his passenger upper control arm at some point. So maybe the driver's one finally.
I mean, of course, it's 2019, right?
Yep.
So, you know, it's an older car, but not that old. And I mean, I gotta say, is that on, you know, the out of spec kind of driving the heck out of this thing?
This car hasn't exactly been a garage queen. Probably never garaged. It's been on track a whole lot. I've seen it kind of go off road. A lot of intense driving comparisons. Most of its life has been supercharging, which is crazy and notoriously harder on a car than level 2 charging it. So that's part of why we kept it. I mean, Kyle wanted to sell it and I literally was like, I think it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to get much for this car. It's almost more worth it to just keep making valuable consumer content with it because people want to know, hey, what happens if I have a high mileage Tesla? Or maybe someone's buying a Model 3 with 100,000 miles and they're like, what can I expect later down the road? And we can report on all of that with this car.
So a little bit of battery degradation from what we can tell that the Tesla, I mean, it's at least not leading you super astray with its, rated range and stuff like that. And also some creaks here and there. But overall, I mean, is it really bothersome the state that this car is in? Or you're like, this is a good, even with all it's been through, even with its quirks, find a road trip?
Still totally find a road trip. It's still comfortable, still has the really comfortable Model 3 seats. Great sound system. I mean, I've been super happy with it. By my calculations, at a typical Midwestern highway speed, I could expect 150 miles on a charge.
Okay.
Maybe up to 200 if the conditions are better. But I'm also seeing what cold weather really does to this car on flat surfaces. Me and Kyle took this to CES a couple years ago, and it was very cold then too. But that was like a lot of elevation change and just hard to get a good read on what the car was actually doing. And it was maybe half the mileage it is now. So this is all interesting, and I'm really enjoying the ride. I mean, figuring out what I've figured out, what I have left to know, and answering a lot of fun questions along the way.
Yeah.
The Midwest is also notoriously far less EV studded than the rest of the country.
Definitely.
And so everywhere I'm going, I went home for Thanksgiving. I've seen dozens and dozens of friends and family. Most of them had never been in an electric car. This was the genuine first electric car experience.
What were their impressions?
They couldn't believe how fast it was, how quiet it was, like all these things that I'm like, we've driven a lot of electric cars and nice ones or even new ones, like the new Model 3 compared to this one.
Yeah.
Feels more refined. And I'm not even talking Highland. I'm just talking the newest Model 3 we have in the States. Our colleague Ryan has one. My friend Justin was renting one. We did a podcast with him earlier. I was staying with him, and he and his wife got a Model 3. We talked to him about, the used EV tax credit and how he bought that and road tripped it. And then unfortunately she was in an accident. She's fine. The car was not great, but it's fixed now.
Good.
And their rental car temporarily was a brand new one. And so they got to experience kind of the difference in interior and stuff. And they didn't really think much of it.
Okay.
Fine.
But yeah, I mean, I think if you've never been in an EV and then your family member comes along, definitely get in the EV. And I wonder how many of our viewers are those kind of people where they're like, check it out.
It's funny to bring it to people who are not car people, not Tesla fans or not fans. They just don't really pay attention to Tesla. And they get in the Model 3 and they're like, wow, this is nice. This is luxurious. This is like, and all these things that people traditionally call Tesla out on, saying Model 3 is not luxurious enough. Like, that they need to improve it, which Highland seems to do that. Yeah. But it's funny getting most people's opinions who are not enthusiasts, and it's just the raw, like, this is a great car.
As Kyle loves to say, it's all relative. If you have not been in an EV, probably any EV is going to be impressive in terms of the sound difference between that and an ICE vehicle. And then I think there's a lot of, more focus on the software and, they look more like spaceships too. Yep. Newer cars in general. So definitely super cool. I'd be like, it reminds me of this topic that I've kind of been thinking about lately, which is like, if you're introducing someone to EVs, what are the FAQs about road tripping, but also EVs in general that you can just like have in your back pocket to throw at someone in a conversation. But I wonder how many people who have an EV really have road tripped it yet, even though that's such a big concern of range anxiety.
Yeah, it's really interesting how many people are buying EVs and the numbers they look at are price and range. At some point, it was 0 to 60. We've almost seemed to gloss over that at this point because
they're all fast.
They're all fast. We're almost bored of that. So now it's like, okay, what's the range and what's the price? But then you've asked these people, have you ever pushed it? And so many people I've talked to have never gotten it under 30% state of charge. And they've never road tripped it. They've also never full charged it because they know they're not supposed to. That's good. Like they have some of the knowledge, but it's like most of them are living within a 50% capacity. And so you're like obsessed with this range metric of like, what if I need it? And I'm kind of out here making the point. I'm in a less like, the Midwest has the least superchargers probably of most of the map of the US. And I'm using one of the higher mileage Teslas out there with poor range. It's a smaller Model 3 battery, like smaller than the current one, less efficiency. They made a lot of improvements since this one, plus the obviously battery degradation, which I think Kyle measured to be about 88% at this point, of total capacity remaining. So all these things are going against it, and I'm still road tripping it and not even thinking about range. I just don't care.
Yeah.
There are times where I'm like, it'd be nice to have a bit more, like especially just going around town, but honestly, it's totally fine.
Yeah, I can totally see how that would be your experience, especially in a Tesla. And so from your takeaway of doing this road trip, you're not done with it yet, but like if you had to give someone advice, whether they were going to like go and rent a Tesla, like if they're visiting a city, just being in a Tesla in general, being fresh in that environment, maybe you're exploring a new place, so you want to like be confident, or road tripping it, like what would be the pieces of advice that you give someone?
At the risk of sounding like Shia LaBeouf, just do it. just rent. If you have the chance to rent a car, just rent the Tesla. They're so common nowadays. It's like, I don't know, like it's not going to be that much more expensive. I think it'll be a fun experience. Like rent one or borrow with friends, or not even Tesla necessarily. Just like try an EV out, because I think you'll realize it's not as scary as it could be. And I wouldn't have been able to say that without the experience. Like really living with it has made me realize this is not hard. I don't even think about it anymore. In fact, now every time I get gas in a gas car, I'm like, oh, I forgot gas stations exist. This is obnoxious. Because road tripping is so simple, and most of the superchargers are in cool locations. I mean, today I stopped by a supercharger at like a train museum, and I was like, this is so freaking cool.
Trains.
So it's fine. Everything's fine. Just try it.
Everything's fine. Just try it. It's a little spooky. I mean, when you see that battery getting low and low, I mean, if you do that, which is best for the battery to show up at that low state of charge and then charge it up to, not 100%, but enough to get you to the next station. And that's your experience to the next stop, and kind of leapfrog it that way, getting over that anxiety of going so low, because I think it's just a totally different way of driving a vehicle and doing road tripping. And I think it's different, and it's not necessarily the worst. It is definitely far from perfect, and far from intimidating too. Yep. But I think it's important that we as a team and just people in the EV space do road trip and do push it, and really have the harder moments and treat it as an experiment and an experience as well, so that we can really understand how this industry and the infrastructure and everything and the EVs themselves can get better to provide the experiences that we need along the way to get where we want to go. Yeah.
So to your point in your video, when you talked about your Rivian road trip, I would say just do it, but also do it with a friend. I mean, that eases any sort of stress, maybe not all the stress, but like it can make it more fun and just more interesting. And it's just a shared experience. And that way you're not quite as freaked out as like, well, what if something happens? Yeah. But I'm here to say there probably won't be anything that happens.
Yeah. Have you felt really, really nervous about anything along the way so far?
Not even when I was navigating to a supercharger in the middle of nowhere in Kansas. I was like, well, I'm trusting the car knows that this thing is here because I'm arriving with 2%.
Yeah. And I mean, that's part too, is on the automakers to make the software and of course the cars that all match up so that I, as the user, can trust it. Yep. No doubt there.
So get out there.
Get out there and start road tripping your EV. And if you can't, live vicariously through us in the meantime.
That's right.
Thanks again. And we will see you next time on the Out of Spec podcast.
Cheers.